I love it. And apparently you guys also love it when I create a podcast which delivers a structured framework on a specific topic. It makes it a lot more actionable. And of course, the purpose of these podcasts, of course, yes, getting education, but then also being able to take something and apply it, take action. It's the whole reason why we keep the messaging in our podcast singular, so you don't get too caught up in multiple things to do. You can just take one single thing that you've learned and apply it to your business or apply it to yourself. In today's podcast, you're certainly going to get that, and it is an amazing recording here where we dive through the 7 stages of creating yourself a recruiting engine. Now, it's the second episode in the creative recruiting series that we've conducted, and this one was an absolute game changer. It was fantastic. I didn't expect it to go that way, to be honest with you, but I'm certainly glad it did, because we got really granular into these different areas. And of course, it's only a taste of what the guest on the show can provide you through his business. So I encourage you to go and check that out. But I can guarantee that you are going to take something epic from this podcast. Anyway, guys, I'd love to hear your experiences. Please give us your feedback. If you want to leave a review, you can do so on any of the platforms. We'd really appreciate that. Otherwise, let's jump right in. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations, and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form, and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Ryan, welcome back.
Thank you.
You're joining us for the second episode, folks, of the creative recruiting series that I'm conducting here with Ryan England from Core Matters over at thecorematters.com. This is creating a recruiting engine, this episode. In the last episode, we were talking about the recruitment attraction model. Do go back and check this out, that episode out, guys. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is going to tie into this episode. And following on from this episode, there's going to be the third and final podcast, which is going to be why hiring for skills is killing your trade business. Ryan, so we're talking, in the previous episode, we spoke about the recruitment attraction model, where we were talking, I suppose, about some of those. Well, I mean, if I'm honest, we spoke a lot about leadership. We were talking a lot about why very often the owner's the problem, overcoming things like ego and employing things, focused around process, and I suppose really just making yourself stand out in a competitive space where, your competition is looking for the same staff members that you're looking for. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about, I suppose, how to build out that model and a bit more about that creative engine. I'm wondering, does a lot of that tie into things like automation?
Automation is a big part of it. So I don't know about the business owners but most of them I know are working way too many hours to throw something else into it. So yeah, we definitely have some automation, but automation doesn't mean a computer doing the work.
No.
So I have some really creative ways that we make the job seeker automate the process for us.
Yeah. There's a lot
of into that.
And I think as well with recruitment, and it's certainly been my experience over the years, is you can definitely over automate.
Oh yeah.
And there's a huge part of HR which entices you to get a gut feel for people. You can't use technology for that. You need to really be the person having those conversations, and you want to be the person having those conversations, because the other thing I've learned over the years is, rushing this process. I mean, I'm recruiting at the moment. I mean, I've been recruiting basically nonstop for the last 6 months. We're growing so quickly, but part of that process is I've just learned, if you rush it, you'll cock it up. And even after learning this, I did it only recently. I hired a guy, wrong fit, got rid of him. I thought I hired slow, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I certainly fired fast, but again, I can't encourage enough to, taking your time with that process and putting people, just doing it the right way, because it just will save you so much grief. And I think as well, for the better part, the feedback that I typically get is from people that we put through this process is I've never been through a process like this. I love this. They really buy into it, and it makes them really feel like they're becoming part of something that is different, that's extraordinary, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a big, misnomer out there that you put out the job ad, you talk to somebody, they have the skills, you hire them, and everybody lives happily ever after. But most people, and I'll talk about the dating marriage analogy again, most people don't date their spouse for 15 minutes and then decide to get married. But as employers, we do that all the time. 15 minutes in, we like the same sports team, we like the same hobby, you're hired.
Yeah.
You tell me you can turn a wrench? Awesome. I trust you can turn a wrench.
Yeah.
We do that all the time, and then we get disappointed with the results. But I'm very much a hire slow, fire fast type of guy. That's my mentality. In fact, one of the parts of our recruiting engine that we teach is the interview process and how long this interview process should be, from the phone interview to the final offer meeting.
Let's dive into the actual, like this. Let's dive into this process from the ground up. Like, where does it start? Is it?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, it's perhaps writing ad copy or whatever that might be. I'm really interested to hear your
Starts
process.
Before that. So
okay.
We've actually developed what we call the core fit hiring model.
Right.
And so there are 7 components of the model. 3 of them are pre-hire, 3 of them are post-hire, but there's one right in the middle. And if you could see the diagram, there's one right in the middle. It's called core. And core is where you start.
Right.
You start there. Mm-hmm. If you want to attract good people, you first have to become attractive to good people. We talked about that before. Mm-hmm. So what are the things you need to do as an organization in order to become attractive? And we focus on 2 things primarily, but there are a lot of smaller things that come out of it. But 2 of them that we focus on is, number 1, being really clear about your vision for the company. And inside of your vision are your core values, they're your mission statement, your purpose, and where you're going. You in the last episode, you brought up Good to Great. They talk about getting the right people on the bus in that book. It's easy to get people on the bus for a short period of time. But if they're not excited about the destination of the bus, they're going to jump off. But if they're excited about the destination of the bus, going up to the mountains, you're going fishing, you're going wherever, and they're excited, and the bus breaks down, they're going to sit on the side of the road and wait for the tow truck or wait for the mechanic to show up, or they're going to do anything they can to help because they're excited about the destination.
Yeah.
They're not excited about the destination. They're going to get off and call an Uber. Like, they're done. Right. And that's what happens all the time in business. If they're not excited about where the company's going, or more personally, where their career is going, they're going to leave. And so when you as an owner are very, very clear on the vision of your company, where you're going over the next 10 years, what your end game is, and who you need to be there in order to accomplish that. I've got a client that wants to be in 25 different states. Well, he sells that vision because now these guys have relocation opportunities. They have management opportunities. They can move up inside the organization. They can see themselves being there long-term, not being stagnant. Mm-hmm. So that vision and being clear on where you're going and being clear on what it is that you value. So when people tell me I can't find good people, what they're really saying is 2 things. Can't find people that value what I value, and I can't find people that care like I care. That's the problem. And so that's a values and vision conversation.
And where do you and how do you communicate this vision, and where do you put it, and where, like, we're talking about a recruitment process right now. So where does this live?
Everywhere.
Right.
And it dictates all your decisions throughout the company. So the thing about core values is they don't change. They're a set of beliefs that dictate behavior. So before I got into the recruiting side and I was doing the traditional digital marketing, we did fractional CMO work. Right. And one of the things we got really clear on is, what do you value? Because you need to find customers that value what you value. If you value cheap, you got to find customers that value cheap. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with recruiting. If you value family, you're going to need to find employees that value family, so on and so forth. And so that vision, it's internal, it's external. You promote it on the job boards, on your website, on your social media pages. You create videos around it. That message just permeates everything.
Yeah, it's one of those things I feel like Well, I know because we do a similar thing, but like it's sometimes the answers you get are just so cliche, cookie cutter, straight from the textbook. You know what I mean? Like people just think, oh, well, of course we strive to be the best customer experience, business. I'm like, shut up. Like, you don't even know what that fucking means. Like, I think people just don't really, they put things down that they think people want to hear,
Yeah. Yeah. Those are permission to play values, right?
Right.
So, hey, Matt, we are honest.
Yeah.
As opposed to what?
Exactly.
Dishonest? Like, I don't know that I want to do business with you if you're not honest. Like, I don't think you have to tell me you're honest to get me to believe you're honest. Right. But that's what we do. We have integrity. Gosh, I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you money, and in return, you're going to deliver something. I hope you have integrity and don't just take my money. But they do this all the time. And you're right. It's so cliche because it's simple. Figuring out core values is not simple. It's like writing vows for your wedding. Like, it's a hard process. You got to
just write that down. That's great. That permission to play values. I've never heard that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and and so often when we start working with someone and they give us their values, I'm just like, okay, we're going to break this down because when you say you're honest, what are you really saying?
Yeah.
And we get really deep and we help coach them through that process, and then we wordsmith it because this is marketing,
right? So
that it's something that's attractive to people.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we focus, like one of my core values in my company is to create clarity. Everybody knows what clarity means. Well, guess what? All the rest of my values need to be very clear. Yeah, they're not.
Hang on, I don't understand
them too. Yeah, like I got one client who's like, rhinoceros tough is one of their values. I'm like, what does that mean? Or be a buffalo. Like, they're so creative. Unless you work there, you don't know what that means.
Right.
Is that
one a good thing or a bad thing?
It depends on what you're doing with it. So,
how does that mean? Because again, from a marketing point of view, in a recruitment stage, like, how do you communicate that? You need to be rhinoceros tough.
Yeah. Like, what does that mean? So I'm very much on the let's be clear. Like, if fifth graders should be able to understand it, which I think is like marketing copy 101, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm very much more on that. Now, for those companies like Be a Buffalo, that's truly become their brand. I would argue that it's not necessarily a value. The value is behind that.
Right.
It's behind that. So they had a creative marketing team that came up with it. And that's what they run with now. But it's still important because even Be a Buffalo is a brand. People can get excited about a brand.
Right.
I mean, we were talking about Apple before the show, right? People get excited about the Apple brand, even though it has yet to innovate on its technology in almost a decade, right? Right. But people are still sold out to the brand. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And so I get that, being a brand loyalist. And when you have creative values like that, it creates brand loyalty.
Yeah.
And even in the recruiting space. So values and vision is one part of it. And the other part is the story that you're telling. So I ask people all the time, like, what's marketing? And they, give me, everybody's got some definition, but I'm like, when your secretary goes home and yells at her husband because she hates her boss, she's marketing for your company.
Right.
Not the kind of marketing you want, but she's marketing. Mm-hmm. And so your employees should be your biggest raving fans.
Yeah.
And so you have to treat them right. You have to give them a vision, sell them on the vision, but then you have to give them the story to tell, because most people don't know what story to tell. And I'm not talking about your history or any of that stuff. How do people talk about you in the marketplace from an employment perspective? And so that story is really important part of core. And that's what leaders open up their meetings with. If they do an annual retreat, that story is recited there. Like, that story is really important to the overall culture of the organization.
So let's talk a little bit about the story then. Like, let's dive into it. What is the story more about? Like, vision, where you want to be, where you're at, where you're going? Like, what is it?
Yeah. So if your values are what you use to dictate behavior, the story is the behavior that's showing up.
Right.
So we're telling the story about the behaviors.
And so the story is ever evolving?
Yes, the story can evolve. Yes, your values won't, but your behaviors will, as you start to embrace the values more and you hold people more accountable to that.
So the story is not so much the destination, it's the journey to get there.
Absolutely. It's what gets people excited to get out of bed in the morning. Like, your vision is part of your story. Mm-hmm. So when you hire somebody and they're late to work, being late to work is a symptom of the fact that they didn't want to come to work today. Because everybody can get out of bed 15 minutes earlier.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't want to be to work 15 minutes early in case traffic went well. So now they're late. And so what's that story they're telling themselves when their alarm goes off and they roll over and say, oh, I got to go back to work today. So that's the story. And it's all driven by that culture. The culture of your organization is central to anything you do in recruiting. So the more intentional about it, the more well-defined it is, the more accountable you are to it, even as a leader. I had one company I talked to, we didn't start working together, but one of their values was humility. And I met the owner. There wasn't an ounce of humility in the owner. So it starts to question.
Permission to play.
Yeah. Why aren't we holding ourselves accountable to our values? So that's the first part of the recruiting engine, is the core. And that's probably the part that's the hardest for most people to work on. Because to your point, in the last episode, we talked about you can have this great dating profile, but if the person behind the 10-year-old picture is not the same person, you have a problem. And so in our diagram, you'll see that core looks like a gear because it impacts all the other stages of the process.
And so would I be right in presuming or assuming that the core, like, that takes up the majority of the time? Like, the ripple effect will impact everything once the core's been established?
Yep.
Okay.
So we have a 12-week program that we teach the attraction model to, and we spend 8 of those weeks on core.
Wow.
And only 4 weeks on the rest, because core is so important.
Wow.
And it's hard too, because most people aren't thinking about it. Most people aren't thinking about that stuff. And we challenge them through the process. Like, they have to submit their values to us, and then we get to call BS and call them out on their values.
Yeah, and I think that's a healthy exercise for, especially for people that have been in business for a while, because they get stuck in that whole, well, it ain't broke, why fix it sort of mindset. And until they're challenged with things like that, like this, it never really becomes a reality. It never really becomes a priority, and it never really gets implemented as a result.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's kind of a metaphor for coaching in general, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if your mind's just not right and you're not willing to be taught, you'll never do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had clients who we finished the core process and they're like, I hated you for 8 weeks. Yeah. But I'm so grateful we got through it, because now it's so worth it. Yeah. It's so worth it now. So yeah, core is where we spend a lot of time, because it's something that most people haven't thought about and they haven't been challenged on it. So
and where do you go from core?
So from core, we go into find. And find is one of those things, we talked about the fishing analogy, right? You keep going to the canal and you're not finding the fish you're looking for. So we teach a process called job modeling inside of find, which is, let's get really clear on what the ideal employee looks like. Like, we have customer personas. You're probably familiar with that term, right?
Certainly.
The avatar, the customer persona. Yeah. So we do that in marketing all the time. And what's a typical customer persona look like?
I want someone that's got lots of money and...
Yeah. But when you dig down to it, like, this is Jill. She's 43 years old. She's got 3 kids at home. She goes to church on the weekend. She lives in this zip code. All that stuff's protected classes in the United States. You cannot hire based on any of that stuff. Right? So how do you create a customer or an employee persona? How do you create that? Everything's protected.
Right.
So we focus on behaviors and traits.
Okay.
And so we create what we call a job model, which is essentially an employee persona that goes through, how does this person how do they exemplify the core values? How do they do all of these things? And then we take a step back and we're like, does that define your ideal employee? And when they say, yep, we go write a job ad off of it. And that's what we start promoting.
And then I suppose it's not really, a conversation for this. It's not really a topic for this conversation, but then I guess like that becomes relevant with don't tell me, show me, because people can say, that's me, and you can only do so much, I suppose, without actually.
Once we have the job model, it impacts the automate and find, automate and hire, which are the next 2 stages. So the job model is essentially the plan for how we're going to get the right people. It's a marketing plan for that specific position. So if you're looking for a plumber, The job model is the marketing plan for plumbers. And what do you put in a good marketing plan? How are you going to qualify people? How are you going to disqualify people? How much are you willing to spend to get a lead in? It's all the same stuff, except we do it from an employment perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that component of it. Most clients don't like that part. So that's why we do a lot of that heavy lifting for them. A lot of the research is just conversations. But one of the things we'll do is a lot of people have that one employee that they wish they could clone. Like, oh, if I could just get Jimmy, if I could just get 10 Jimmys, I'd never need to hire again. My business would be awesome. Well, great. Let's run a behavioral profile on Jimmy and find out what makes Jimmy tick.
Right.
And then we're going to go find more Jimmys based on that behavioral assessment.
I think there's actually power as well in, although I think it's good for, business owners and managers to understand the process. It's sometimes good to have somebody else like yourselves, for example, actually take on that process, because it removes that personal sort of,
the bias.
But yeah. Like I know.
So what we do is we do one together with them.
Right.
And then we teach them how to do the rest on their own. Because once the first one's done, 80% of the work's done. Right. It's just minor tweaks for the next one. So, and then we actually create what's called the 360 marketing plan underneath Find.
Okay.
And so if you've ever heard of a 360 review, we take that process and flip it into a marketing plan.
Okay. I'm not familiar. So what is it?
So a 360 review, this is something you do usually in corporate America. But if it's my turn to get my annual review, I'm going to review myself. My boss is going to review me. My subordinates are going to review me. My peers are going to review me, and my suppliers are going to review me. So I'm getting reviewed 360 degrees. Right. And so we create a marketing plan that says, who aren't we marketing to that we need to be marketing to when it comes to employees? Because it's different than customers, right? You can't go to a supplier and say, hey, who do you know? Well, the suppliers don't know your customers. They know your competition.
Right.
So why do we not ask suppliers who they know that might be looking for a job? So we talk about that in the 360 marketing plan, how to do that and how to create systems for marketing to everybody in your sphere of influence that knows employees. Mm-hmm. So, and then when we're done with Find, we go to Automate. That's everybody's favorite. Everybody's favorite to automate. So we find that, well, when we do our work right, we're going to 10x the number of applicants you get.
Right.
Now what do? It's not like you have 10 times the time to manage all that. So we introduced what's called the applicant tracking system. I don't know, have you ever heard of that before?
I probably have, but maybe not by that name. So is it kind of like, I mean, we do a similar thing. I think, I could be wrong, but where we have essentially like deal stages where we move applicants through stages to track where they're at.
Yeah. Yes. So it's like a CRM,
right?
Deal stages. Yeah. Except we call it recruiting workflows. But the thing about an applicant tracking system in particular is that you never have to post to the job boards again.
Yeah,
it connects to all the job boards and posts for you.
Right.
So saves you a ton of time. So usually we'll talk with people that are posting to Indeed because everybody knows Indeed. And then what'll happen is they'll get introduced to the applicant tracking system and they'll get pushed to thousands of job boards, even the little ones they never even heard of. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't physically do that on your own. That's why you need to have the software to do it.
Yeah.
And then the applicant tracking system that we use actually allows people to fast track high quality applicants based on screening criteria that we select for them. So we can actually ask questions during the application process. And if they answer them correctly, we can fast track them. If they answer them incorrectly, we can disqualify them automatically.
Yeah. My software does the same thing. It's pretty cool like that.
Okay. Yeah. So you're probably using an applicant tracking system then.
Yeah. I didn't even know it.
Or either that or you've duct taped and tie wired something to do it for you.
No. It's a software for sure. It's called Go Higher. It's called Go Higher, but it's
that's an applicant tracking system.
Yeah.
And so a lot of automations, a lot of ways to integrate with other platforms, and so the applicant tracking system is really, really important. We use one called Career Plug.
Oh, okay.
And Career Plug is actually designed for trades-based associations and franchises.
Right.
So there's a lot of franchises out there. The franchisor can set up Career Plug and give it to all their franchisees.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So So we use that, but then we operate in the sense of people like our best practices when it comes to hiring. So you can actually reach out to me and I can get you set up on Career Plug under our best practices and the way we set up the workflows and everything else. So I like it because it saves me from having to go set it up every single time. So there's some great ones out there, but most of the people in Career Plug are like gyms, because that's a big one, and then the trades, which is cool. So, and then we also teach.
Do you know if it's global, that one? Like if they're people from all over the world?
So GDPR is the only thing that they're not quite 100% on, but they do have stuff in other countries, just Europe they haven't gone into yet because of that. But they're down in Australia because some of their franchises are down there.
Right. There you go, guys. It's a good tip for you.
Yeah. And then we go into hire. So we spent all this time finding the right people, getting them into our system, getting them in the pipeline. Now we got to interview them.
Right.
And an interview is not 15 minutes, guys. It's not 15 minutes. It's not the fog the mirror test. I had a client a few years back that I'm like, how do you know that you're going to hire somebody? They said, number one, they show up for the interview. They get 90% for that. And then the other 10% is if they can catch the keys to the truck. And they weren't kidding. That was legitimately their hiring process. Like you're hired. So I wrote a book called Unmasked. And if you go to my website, you can download it for free. But it's how to hire the ones you don't want to fire.
Is this, sorry, just to recap on this, this is thecorematters.com?
Yeah.
And the book's called Unmasked.
Unmasked, yep.
Okay.
And if you want the physical version, you can go buy it at Amazon. But if you want it for free, you can download a PDF version of it on my website. It's short. It's written for busy business owners, like 60 pages. But the whole point of it is how do you interview people in a way that gets them to show up authentically? Because that's the problem with guys that turn a lot, is they're professional interviewers. So how do you dig in and how do you find out who that real person is? How do you make sure they're going to align to your values? Then we teach a process-based interview process to where we're actually putting people through the motions versus just asking them questions. So like one of my biggest...
Like testing them.
Almost testing them, but you're testing for behavior, not testing for skills. Like there's a skills component of it, right? If you need someone that can weld, you got to know the guy can weld. So have a welding test set up.
Right.
But for the most part, we're testing for behavior. Do you care enough? Do you give a damn? Are you going to show up and do the work? What are you going to do when you piss somebody off or they piss you off? All of these things that come up that we deal with as owners on a daily basis, we figure out how do we incorporate that into the interview process so that we're actually interviewing the real person and not just the person that's practiced at how to answer interview questions.
And so this is part of hire.
This is part of hire. Yeah. The whole interview process. And then this will go into onboarding, which is the next one. But inside of hire is how do you set proper expectations? And we do this in hire. So if someone leaves employment either because you wanted them to or because they left in the first 90 days, it's a hiring issue. You made a bad decision in the recruiting and hiring process.
Yep.
If it's after 90 days, it's either a leadership or a culture issue. So that's where we draw the line. So let's set proper expectations during the interview process. I did an exit interview for a client a few years ago, and I asked the employee they'd been there like 18 months. I'm like, why'd you leave after 18 months? They go, I'm 18 months in. So what is that, 6 quarters? I'm 6 quarters in waiting for my first quarterly evaluation.
Oh, wow.
They told me that every quarter they do evaluations and they assess, am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job? How do I get the raise? How do I get the promotion? What training is available? That's what they promised when they hired me. They never delivered.
Interesting.
So it's really important that you're setting proper expectations. If you tell the guy, hey, I'm going to bring you in at $17 an hour, and if you work really, really well and you do a good job and you hit all these numbers that I want you to hit, I'll give you a raise to 20. Well, you better follow through on that. Don't be like, oh, he's doing an okay job. He's not worth 20, but I'm not really going to give him 18. Follow through on whatever expectations you set, and on both sides. And so we teach a process called the pullback offer inside of hire, which is when you make the offer to the person, before you sign it and agree to it and everything, pull it back and have an open, honest conversation about expectations. Mm-hmm. It is the number one thing that keeps people from hiring good people.
And
being clear on expectations.
I don't want to go down a rabbit warren here, but what is a good frequency to be having these conversations with team members once they have been hired?
I call them quarterly conversations, so once a quarter.
But I mean, I'm guessing there's, like we're going through this at the moment where we're setting up, like weekly conversations, weekly deliverables, weekly targets, which then have the quarterly conversations. You can kind of go, okay, well, let's look at what's been achieved, what gets missed, why these reasons things are happening.
In between, you should be working on the systems and the processes, and that's what you're managing. So when you're getting together weekly for a deliverable, there's a system in place to create that. Right. But once a quarter, you're sitting down and having a conversation with another human being and talking about what they want out of their life, what they want out of their career, what's working for them, what's not, what communication is good, what communication isn't, what behaviors do you want to see more of. You can't do that on a weekly basis because that'd be like whiplash. Like,
of course.
Yeah. But you do that once a quarter, and then interim, you manage the systems.
Gotcha.
So that's how we recommend doing it. And then once you're done with hire, it's onboard.
Yeah.
So now we've done all the pre-hire stuff, and so now we're on to post-hire. Mm-hmm. And onboarding is not fill out your paperwork, give me your check, direct deposit information, and do you want benefits or not? That's not onboarding. That's compliance.
Right.
Onboarding is like the honeymoon phase for a newlywed couple, right? You get married, you go on honeymoon, then you come back, you move in together, and now you got this transition period. What's going to work, what's not? Which way does the toilet paper go? Like all of that stuff shows up in that honeymoon phase. So it's the same thing with hiring people. What do you do when you screw up? And as an employer, what do we want them to do? We want them to fess up. Well, if they came from an employer that when you fessed up, you got fired, why would they fess up?
Yeah.
So you have to understand that employees come with baggage.
Yeah.
Whatever their previous employer did, said, treated them a certain way, they're coming with that. Yeah. So how do you let them know what's the right way to work with you? So that's onboard.
Mm-hmm. And so
we teach a 90-day process for that.
So just diving a little bit into onboarding, just so people we know what it's not. Compliance.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your bank details? What's your superannuation fund?
Yeah.
What is it then? So, I mean, is it training and equipping? Is it this is your week one, do these things. This is, our trainers, our company manual. You need to read through this and understand it. Like, what is it?
Yeah. So we teach a process called the 2-4-12 launch.
Okay.
And what that is in the first 2 weeks of your new employee being there, they are 0% accountable to anything.
Okay.
You can't get mad at them in the first 2 weeks. You can't reprimand them. You can't tell them they did a bad job. Now, you have to be careful what you give them to do, but you need to pretend like this person is brand new here. They don't know how to work with us. So for 2 weeks, they are getting mentored, they're getting coached. People are just pouring into them. This is how to assimilate you into our business. So that's the first part. Then the first 4 weeks, what you want to do is introduce them to your processes and systems.
This is still part of the first 2 though, right? This isn't the next 4.
Yeah. So it's 2, 4, 12. So it's full 90 days. It's a full 12 weeks. Okay. So in the first 4 weeks, you're introducing them to their processes and systems. Now remember, the first 2 weeks, you can't hold them accountable to anything except for showing up. And then in the first 12 weeks is where you're actually preparing them to take over those processes and systems and to own them. Gotcha. At the end of 90 days. And so we have a really detailed process on how we do this. We teach this to hiring managers, and we help them develop a system throughout their entire organization so everybody's onboarded the same way.
And does that typically is that like a checklist? Is that?
That's a big part of it, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And within the checklist, there will be processes.
Sure.
Yeah, within the checklist, there will be processes. But yes, it's a big, long checklist, and it's employee-led, which is the best part. The employee's checking the list off for you, not the manager.
Sure.
The manager needs to be managing, not managing a checklist.
Right. Yeah.
Almost everything we do when it comes to onboarding and engaging and retaining employees is employee-led.
Gotcha.
So,
and I suppose, again, tying into leadership and expectations, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Everything rolls uphill, right? Yeah. So, and then we go into engagement is the next one. Engage is what I call it. And this is really, how do you keep people engaged long-term? And one of the simplest ways we found to do that is to create an employee-led growth accelerator program. So we call it. So I look at you and I say, Matt, you've been here 90 days. I'm so excited to have you on the team. What do you want to do with your life? And I have that conversation with you.
Like a one-on-one conversation?
One-on-one conversation. What do you want to do with your life? You tell me what you want to do with your life. You want to go start a nonprofit digging wells somewhere, for people that don't have fresh water. Awesome. What can I do to support you to do that? Now, I know what most business owners are thinking right now is, what does this have to do with me getting value from my employee? How does this tie to welding steel or,
right.
Or construction? You're pouring into the human being. Right. People aren't widgets. So I pour into the human being. I help you start your own 501c3. You become a nonprofit and you're out digging wells. Awesome. I'm happy for you. Are you going to be a better employee because I poured into you? Are you going to pour back into me? Are you going to reciprocate? Or are you going to be like, hey, thanks for the help and peace out? And so study after study has shown that employers that pour into people and invest in people personally have higher engagement rates, higher retention rates, and ultimately more profitability, because happy, engaged employees are more profitable.
Yeah, I love it.
And it doesn't cost you any extra money to have that conversation. So, and then finally, the last part of our model is assess. If we're not measuring this, it's just a lot of talk and a lot of kumbaya type moments that don't really do anything for us. We need to know what's working, what's not working. We need to be able to sit down and say, hey, when we have these conversations, so when we follow our process and we properly set expectations, those people stick around longer. When we don't follow our process because we're in a hurry or we disregard it, those people leave. Being able to measure that. How well are these processes working? How well are these systems working?
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
So we teach companies how to implement our core fit hiring system inside their business. And they see higher retention rates. They see lower turnover. They see happier customers because employees are happier. Customers are happier, which means a lot of them are driving up prices. They're increasing revenue because they're charging more because they provide a better value and better service. And they're ultimately more profitable.
Anyone that's heard this podcast and hasn't reached out to you is an idiot.
You said it, not me. So it's amazing how much your employees impact your profit. I just got off a call with somebody, 20 years in business, best year they've ever had. And they attribute it all to the work that we've been doing in helping them with this.
No doubt. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that was, are we done here for,
that's the process.
That's
I can keep going, but
I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm sure people want to get back to work at this point.
I feel we could literally probably spend hours talking on any one of those topics. So that's been an excellent overview. So I'll just to recap on that anyway. There's core, which moves into find. There's automate. Then there's hire. And from hire we go into onboard. Then from onboard into engagement, and then the assess stage. So that's a great little ecosystem you've developed there. I love it.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, that was the second episode of the Creative Recruiting series. I'm speaking with Ryan England from Core Matters over at thecorematters.com. And head over there because there's a free book of his which he's written, which is called Unmasked. Never Make a Bad Hire Again. Discover the simple process to uncover their true nature during the interview. Beautiful. So go and grab that. It's over at thecorematters.com. We're going to come back with the final episode of this series, which is going to be why hiring for skills is killing your business. Guys, if you have questions, if you have any experiences with this topic, please let us know. Jump into the Facebook group when you see this podcast come out and let us know what your experience has been. Ryan, this was an absolutely epic podcast. I loved it. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Thank you.
All right, listeners, we'll be back with the third and final episode in following week. So stay tuned for that one. Otherwise, that's a wrap. I have an important message for a select few. That's not all of you. This is for a select few of you guys that are listening or watching this. It's for trade business owners that have been around for a while. They understand the frustrations of marketing and being in control or not being in control. Guys, it's 2021 and many of you are marketing yourselves like it's the year 2000. Off the back of a global pandemic, we've seen huge shifts in the market with people turning to service providers they know, like, and trust. There's never been a better time to establish the tools and frameworks in your business to take advantage of these things. These things that will serve you not only now, but serve the business ongoing. Over at Tradie Web Guys, we've recently launched the Elevation Program. It equips businesses with the tools and the programs required to successfully market themselves. It gives you tools to re-engage with your past and present clients whilst nurturing potential clients. It creates assets in your company's name with no proprietary licenses. You own these things 100%. It gives your business a huge head start on the search engines with advanced SEO, and it collates all of the programs and all the services you need into one neat little bundle, including things like web development, website management, email marketing, SEO, Google Ads, loads of different softwares, strategy, support, and a bunch of other things. After going through this program, you'll have all the tools you need to market your business ongoing. You'll have a huge head start in your marketing, and you'll also have a CRM so you can continue to build your database whilst engaging your current customers and re-engaging those customers that you've essentially forgotten about. Marketing tools that you need, and they'll all be in your control. You don't owe anyone anything. You'll be able to dial it up and down essentially as you see fit. So why is this an important time to talk about this? Guys, it's important to know a lot about a little and a little about a lot. Meaning, you want to be in control. You want to know enough to be dangerous. I'm not trying to give you more work here. Essentially, we'll set everything up for you, teach you the basics, and then it's all yours. It's complete transparency. You'll never grow a business past a certain point without marketing. Word of mouth will only ever get you so far. We've spoken about it on the podcast a load of times. At some stage, you need to invest in these things. This is the simplest and most affordable way to do it. For more information, head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/elevation, fill in the form, and let's make 2021 the year that you took control. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from this show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.